this is quite a big jigsaw puzzle. Unfortunately, most people just focus solely on the food that they eat, exercising, and absolutely those two things are an important part of the jigsaw puzzle. But when when things are out of alignment up here, it wipes out all the good that you're doing in those other two areas potentially. Because if morning ladies, right, so I'm going to get straight into it, and at the end what I'll do is I'm going to give you a couple of little tasks to do to get going with. Okay, so the first thing you need to understand is that the obesity, now the term obesity applies whether you have a couple of inches to lose or you only have a lot of inches to lose. Obesity is an inflammatory disorder. Okay, now this is one thing a lot of people aren't aware of. So we can gain fat as a result of inflammation being present in the body. And how that occurs is in a number of ways. One, through the food, our food and drink choices. Those cause direct inflammation on the body. When there is inflammation in the body, two things occur. So the inflammation causes the pancreas to release insulin. Insulin tops up our energy stores. If we're not burning that off quick enough, that then stores as fat. When we release insulin from the pancreas, that triggers another internal inflammatory response also. So the cycle continues between the pancreas and inflammation occurring. So even if you sort out your diet and your lifestyle choices, don't worry, Melanie, I was late as well trying to fathom out Facebook's crazy system. So even if you were to sort out your diet and your lifestyle choices, if there's inflammation still present in the body, that cycle is still going to continue. So just to explain to Melanie, because obviously she'll have missed that. So that cycle I'm referring to is when we have inflammation in the body, that initiates the pancreas to release insulin. That insulin tops up our energy stores. If we're not burning that off and our energy stores are full to the brim, the excess stores as fat. So if we have several avenues of insulin being initiated from the pancreas, there's an overload there of insulin that we just can't, that the system just can't cope with. So unless you are incredibly active, it's inevitable it's going to store as fat. So what are the foods that cause insulin to be produced? You're probably au fait with this anyway. So we've got, there's sugar, there's simple carbohydrates. Carbohydrates in general do, but we have two types of carbohydrates. We have simple carbohydrates and we have complex carbohydrates. Now, a lot of people engage in the ketos approach, which is basically eliminating any sort of any carbohydrates, so any breads, any rices, anything like that. The problem with that is, now this applies to me, so when I don't have any carbohydrates in the day at all, I'm all right for a couple of days, but if I consistently do that over the space of at least a week, then I can feel very, I I can get hyperglycemic. So my blood sugar levels can drop significantly. So that is the risk that you take by completely cutting out carbohydrates. So what I usually say to people is when they are, if they can get away with it, great, do it. But what you've got to understand is once you achieve your desired weight, body, you know, dress size, whatever your goal is, you must then reintroduce the carbohydrates, the right carbohydrates, because when you don't have any fat left to burn off and your energy stores aren't being filled up adequately by the food that you're eating, your body only has one place to go, and that is lean muscle for fuel. When that happens, losing lean muscle means that it's going to make your fat metabolizing process sluggish. Your body is going to go into starvation mode, and then you will automatically start storing fat to preserve preserve energy to turn to, because it doesn't know when its next source of food is going to come from, which will start your cycle all over again. So although ketos is great for achieving fast results, it can be detrimental moving forward. So it is always good to introduce some carbohydrates, the complex carbs. So the difference between the two is the complex carbohydrates. These are much slower, they're released slower into the system. So they're slow release carbohydrates. Simple carbohydrates, which is your typical white bread, white pasta, sugar is table sugar is actually a simple carbohydrate. And those spike your insulin levels at a rapid rate. So if we go back to this cycle of inflammation that I explained to you, if you are releasing insulin at a rapid rate because of the speed that these carbohydrates incredibly addicted to the insulin. The other thing that you got to bear in mind is the fruit is still like I said, still a sugar. If you are consuming fruit, always make sure that you have it in its whole form, not in the juice form. If it's in the juice form, again, that sugar is being absorbed into the bloodstream, which is then spiking your insulin levels significantly. Again, you'll notice there was actually a test done on this many years ago. It was on a celebrity fat loss challenge program. I can't remember the name of it. But they did a test on. They literally sat them in a room with some fruit. I think it were whole oranges actually, and orange juice, freshly squeezed orange juice. And they actually found that and this is true, you'll find that you will be able to consume more of the juice than you will the whole fruit itself. The reason being is because you've got the fiber there slowing down the absorption into the bloodstream. So people who engage in juicing detoxes to lose weight, they're good so long as you're including protein. But if they are heavily dense in fruit, you are spiking your insulin levels significantly. I know some, a couple of PTs actually, who refer to them as sugar bombs, and they are sugar bombs. So the likes of Jason Vale, his juice recipes are heavily dense in fruit. So I would always recommend to stay away from those ones. If you are going to do any juicing, yes, do it, because you are increasing your nutritional absorption, but make sure that you are moderating the amount of fruit that's in the juice. So when I used to do juicing, I can't do them at the moment because I've got a stoma. So, but previously when I did do them, I would weigh out my fruit. So to give you an idea, a whole orange, a large orange, basically makes up our daily allowance of sugar. Anything more than that, we're exceeding it. So if somebody is diabetic, worst thing in the world they can do is overload their system with fruit, because they are going to spike their insulin levels significantly. So, again, let's going back to the fat loss problem. Spiking your insulin levels is the absolute worst thing you can do, because it is going to create that cycle on repeat of the pancreas releasing insulin. The pancreas releases insulin, causes an inflammatory response. Inflammation being present in the body triggers the pancreas to release more insulin, and the cycle is going to continue. So there's a couple of pointers straight away. Now, the brain. Let's go to the brain. So our brain, when we are in a stress response, it does a number of things. Number one, it's going to direct you to what it feels is going to make you feel safe. What's going to bring you back up to safety. I'm just going to show you this very, very briefly. So this is using the polyvagal theory. Okay. So when we are in a stress response, so when we are here, this is fight flight, or when we are very low and depressed, which is down here at the bottom of the ladder, our brain instantly, our unconscious mind, specifically in our fear center, in the amygdala, wants to bring us back to safety. So it associates certain things with safety, making you feel good, releasing those happy hormones. It wants to bring you back up to here as quickly as possible. It wants you to feel good, bottom line. So if your brain has associated certain foods with feeling good, really, really pay attention to this. I mean, when I did my training in neuroscience, I became more aware of it. When my mood would dip. It wouldn't matter if my daughter was making cupcakes in front of me. If she offered me one, I wouldn't take it. So if my mood was fine, I wouldn't want it. But if my mood dips, my brain has already given me permission to engage in that offering, because it knows, well, that's going to make you feel better. Now, even though intelligently I've got the knowledge to counteract that, unfortunately, logic never overrides emotion, which is why you'll get these nail-biting urges, and you just can't overcome them. It's like an itch that won't go away. If you know something's there, that's like best thing you can do is not have certain things in the cupboard. I know if you've got kids, it's really, really difficult not to do that. But keep them to a bare minimum, or keep things in that you know you're less likely to turn to if your mood moves further down the emotional regulatory ladder. Until you address this emotional encoding, what's driving this dis-ease in the body, this uncertainty in the body, this fear in the body, your brain will always direct you to whatever it feels, whatever it's associating with an improved mood. So whether that's food, whether that's alcohol, maybe a glass of wine after a long day in the office, maybe the kids have been driving you crazy, you think, oh God, I just need a glass of wine. How many people say that? And that's because the brain has associated, okay, you feel stressed. I don't want you to feel this way. I want you to feel calm and relaxed. Okay, so when did I last feel this? Okay, I last felt that way here when I was doing this. But what you've got to think about is, particularly when this is quite common with alcohol. Alcohol is usually engaged in a social setting, typically. So we are around people who make us feel good. We are maybe laughing, joking, smiling. We feel a level of acceptance, which again brings us back to safety. If there's music there, that is a natural trance inducer. If there is, if you're hugging and kissing, that again, induces all those happy hormones. When you have alcohol mixed in with all those things that are giving you an abundance of happy hormones, it is going to enhance that happy feeling. So when you're up here, the alcohol is going to enhance this feeling, this happy and regulated feeling. When you eliminate the parts of that landscape that are influencing this abundance of happy hormones, your default emotion, what's going on in the fear center, what your fear center has been alerted to from your surroundings, will default back. So you'll dip down to here or here. But because you've got stored alcohol in your system potentially, these emotions are enhanced. The brain doesn't connect the dots though. So it would divert you. I want to feel better again, so I'll have more. Or it'll divert you to food, which is why people tend to, after a night out, get home, they'll go and raid the fridge. Because the brain goes to whatever it associates with feeling good, feeling better. So it is absolutely vital to address the encoding that's driving these emotions. And most of the time, these emotions stem back from childhood. The other thing that happens is when we are in a fight-flight response, we release lots of cortisol. Our body gets flooded with cortisol. Cortisol can impact how well we tone and build muscle, lean muscle. So even if you are going to the gym regularly, maybe you're doing regular exercises at home, whatever it is you're doing, if your body is being flooded with cortisol, it will impact your muscle tone and your ability to tone and build muscle. That in turn is going to affect the fat metabolizing process. Also, when we're in the fight-flight response, the body needs to preserve energy, and it does so in a number of ways. The amygdala, which is our fear center, communicates with the main nerve in the parasympathetic system called the vagus nerve. Now, the vagus nerve communicates with all our major organs. It communicates with our gut. It communicates with our immune system, and it hinders our ability to regulate inflammation. But not only that, it also stores fat as an emergency reserve fund in case it's needed. Because it doesn't know how long, because it's so used to being in this fight-flight response, which has become usually our default setting, it stores fat in case it needs it, because we use fat as fuel. So it slows down on our organ function to preserve energy as well. It shuts off our gut, our digestive process, to preserve energy. And it hinders our ability to regulate inflammation. So all this inflammation that's been occurred as a result of all these things, the body isn't in a fit state when it's in fight-flight response to address it. So the inflammation remains and the cycle continues. So it's really, really important to address what's going on upstairs, because it influences everything. It is a starting point for everything. Moving backwards isn't going to get you anywhere at all. You really need to start with what's going on up here. Yes, the knowledge in the nutritional side of things is important, but if the mind's counteracting everything that you're doing as a result of this chain reaction, it's a losing battle, because you may gain some progress, but rest assured you will end up back at square one if this jigsaw puzzle isn't complete. The other thing that happens when our digestive system shuts down is we are minimizing the amount of nutritional absorption that is occurring, because the gut can't break down food that we're eating if it's been switched off to preserve energy for the fight-flight response. When our digestive system is shut off, that then increases our acidity levels in the gut, which again causes further inflammation. So can you see how it really, really is a chain reaction? Even if you have the best diet in the world, if your digestive system's shut off, what good is it if you're not absorbing the nutrients that you're consuming? So my advice to anybody is, whilst you are going through the process of regulating your nervous system and putting the brakes on your sympathetic system, which is your fight-flight response, keep your food choices light. So if you can, keep them as liquid as you can, but also making sure that you're keeping your protein levels up. When you're having solid foods, make sure that you are having things like chicken, fish. All these are easy to digest. Going to your red meats, porks, all those are too hard to digest. Again, another reason to stay away from the simple carbohydrates. They're incredibly difficult for the gut to break down at the best of times, let alone if your gut's been switched off as a result of where you are in your sympathetic system. So yes, you need the carbohydrates to avoid becoming hypoglycemic potentially, and also to make sure that you are making it easier to integrate back in when you've lost the inches, when you've lost the fat. Because if you suddenly start to introduce carbohydrates when you've had none at all, that's quite a lot of overwhelm for the gut. So again, you need to slowly introduce them. And that's why, another reason why I always suggest having at least one portion of complex carbohydrates each day. And then when you need to start to introduce more, it's an easier transition than going from absolutely none to 100 miles an hour. Again, your intake of carbohydrates need to be relative to your activity levels. So if you're not particularly active, then you maybe only want to be having carbohydrates in the morning or in the evening, early evening, so that they're topped up for the next for the day. I wouldn't be having carbohydrates at lunchtime, for example, because you haven't got much time to burn it off really. But at least you've got the rest of the day to burn it off. If you have them either first thing in the morning or you have them early evening. Again, not too close to bedtime. I would have them early evening, so that it's topping up your energy stores. Yes, you'll burn off some of them during sleep, but your reserves will still be adequate enough for the rest of the day. So yes, I hope that makes sense. I'm trying to think, is there anything? I tried to make some. Oh yeah. So another point to make is the brain can associate trauma with holding on to fat. So let me explain this a bit better. So let's say this is very common for women who have maybe lost children, who've had miscarriages, or they've had bad breakups. If the brain associates you looking good with that emotional distress, one of the snapshots that will be taken and encoded on the fear center is your body image, how you look and you feel. So if it associates you looking and feeling good with that emotional distress that it never wants to feel again, it will hold on to that fat. And it doesn't matter what you do, it will hold on to it. When you resolve that problem, that encoding, and the system feels safe, it no longer needs to associate looking good with that pain, with any emotional distress. I had this came up for me with one of my case studies. Now, when I did my hypnotherapy training, this was when I had Isabella. And if you actually go to my website, you'll be able to see actually her testimonial, video testimonial, and she talks about it. So I needed to do a inchloss case study, and the only person I had coming forward was Isabel. Now, obviously with my background in nutrition, I obviously made sure obviously all her ducks were in a row nutritionally. I mean, ideally, I didn't want her to have any ducks in a row for the hypnotherapy inchloss, but she did. So obviously, I knew then she had inflammation going on. I mean, her diet was absolutely perfect. She was exercising regularly. She didn't have any indiscrepancies in terms of her lifestyle. So on paper, everything was fine. So I did apply my knowledge in terms of inflammation and insulin and everything else into the hypnosis process. But it was only when I brought her in as a case study for the trauma work that we really started to turn that corner. Now, Isabel also has an ex who is a narcissist, and she suffered narcissistic abuse from this man. Now, although they weren't together anymore, and they hadn't been together for many, many years, he would, typical of narcissists, what they do is they come in and out of your life because they don't want you to move on. They always want to be the main focus of your attention. They want to influence your emotions all the time, whether they're with you or they're not with you. And this was a case with her ex. Every time he'd get in touch, she would get activated. Now, she was always on dating sites, and she would either attract the wrong people, or she would completely run a mile without giving the person she'd been on a date with a chance. The reason being is because all these issues, the issue with her ex, the issue with her not being able to lose inches, despite all her other ducks being in a row, were all as a result of childhood trauma. So her childhood experiences led her into a domestic abusive relationship. The domestic abusive relationship alerted her fear center of, okay, when you look good, this is what happens. You get emotionally hurt. And you can't move on from it. So to prevent you from that happening again, I'm going to hold on to this weight. So there was two elements going on here. One, the association with safety. And two, the body being flooded with cortisol by constantly being in fight-flight response as a result of her ex constantly coming in and activating her all the time and shining a great big light on those emotional wounds. Once we address the encoding from childhood, she lost an inch all over. We didn't change anything in terms of her diet. Diet stayed the same. She was still doing the same exercise. Everything else stayed the same. The only thing that altered was the emotional encoding that was driving all these responses. So it really is incredibly powerful, the mind. So I'm going to give you a couple of tasks to do to get on with. I want you to really get clear, first things first, because the brain needs a really good reason to start something. It needs a good reason to fix something because the brain takes comfort in what's familiar. So what you are potentially embarking upon is unfamiliar territory. That's dangerous to the unconscious mind. So what you need to do is you need to give it a really, really good reason as to why it needs to consider this moving out of its comfort zone, and why it's beneficial to you. So I want you to get clear on why you want to achieve the results that you want to achieve. Why is it important for you to heal? Now, a lot of people will say, oh, well, particularly when it's inchloss, I want to look good. Okay, great. We need to really break it down. And because I've gone through medically and clinically what happens when you're in a stress response, hopefully I've given you a few light bulb moments. So if you consider your health, what does overweight mean for your health? If your health is compromised, what would that mean for your quality of life? What would it mean? How would it impact your ability to earn money? How would it impact your ability to effectively parent your children? How would it impact your ability to keep a roof over their head? I want you to really, really get clear on this. Remember, your unconscious mind needs a bigger reason than I just want to look good. Because potentially your unconscious mind is associating looking good with emotional distress. So that is not going to cut it. What greater pain can you connect with? And I want you to really feel into it. Imagine your health getting so compromised it had serious consequences for your overall life, for you and your family. I want you to connect with worst case scenario. Really feel that emotion, because that's what your conscious mind needs to connect in with. It doesn't want you to be in pain, remember. It doesn't want you to experience pain. So when you drop into an emotion with an event that may not have happened yet, your brain doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's not real. It doesn't know the difference. But it doesn't want you to feel pain. It doesn't want you to feel distress. So by associating a greater pain than looking good does to this encoded emotion that you may not know what it is at this present moment in time, may be the driving force to allow your unconscious mind to open up to what's unfamiliar territory. Because actually, if I stay here, this is danger. Okay, we don't want danger. So to change that, I've got to do this. That is more impactful when you engage in trauma modalities along with it. But just purely by going through this process, you're more likely for logic to have an influence on your fear center. Without connecting a greater pain, you got no chance of logic overriding emotion. You may do short term, but long term you won't. So that's your task number one. Task number 2. I want you to do a timeline of events. I want you to go starting from your earliest memory to present time. Put down as many as you possibly can. For each memory, I want you to think about what emotions you attached to those events. How did you feel? When you connect in with those events now as your adult self, does it trigger any emotions still? Now, just because it doesn't trigger any emotions doesn't mean there's nothing encoded. It could mean you're disassociated, which is very common. So what we want to do with this timeline is we want to find a common denominator of emotions. Now, to connect this in with your weight gain, inchloss journey, I want you to think back to a time when you had your ideal body weight. What was happening? Was there any traumatic experiences associated when you looked at your best, at your ideal body weight? And then think about the emotions that you felt then. And we're connecting those in with, because when we do we address trauma encoding, it's not the event, it's the emotion. So we have to, this is why the timeline of events is so important. It's really important exercise. You need to go back to the earliest memory of when you felt that emotion. Emotion, not the event, emotion. And that is what needs addressing. Now, all the other events throughout your life will have left their own stamp, their own imprint. They'll have their own individual snapshots, but there will be the biggest common denominator throughout most of your events. And this is why you need to go through all of them and really think about what emotions you were feeling. Go back to the earliest events, and that will desensitize everything else moving forward. And then the rest of it's a mopping up job. But when you go through your timeline of events, you may find you've got a couple of groups of common denominators. So you may have a number of events that have the same set of emotions. You may have another a group of events that have, again, a different set of emotions. So those are all different things that would need working on. But in relation to your inch loss, association with fat being a weight gain being safety, we need to look at, was there a time where you felt your best? And was there any traumatic experiences that occurred around that time? Now, I did this exercise with one of the case study, actually. And she was, she remembered that she felt her best, or looked her best, when she was with her ex-husband. So that's when she gained weight. Now, although she's happily married in a new relationship now, her unconscious mind is now associating, well, if you lose weight, he may not want you now if you lose weight. So her unconscious mind is now associating weight with happiness, with contentment. But actually that excess weight is actually no good for our health. So we need to address the emotions that she experienced at the time of her breakup with her husband, her ex-husband. And we need to trace those emotions back to the earliest memory. So we desensitized the emotions, the experience with her husband, and then we addressed the deeper rooted encoding. So can you see how this is a really, really big jigsaw puzzle? I've probably literally kind of blown your mind now, but it really is a huge jigsaw puzzle, huge. So I don't know who's on. I think Melanie's still on. If you've got any questions, you got any questions? I'll wait a couple of minutes to see if there's any questions. No, doesn't seem to be anything coming through, unless Facebook's got a delay. Now, if any of you would want to work on this further, I am putting together a beta group for mindful inchloss. Now, this is going to incorporate the nutritional aspect and the mind. So it's going to incorporate the two. Because obviously there's no point in us fixing the mind if you haven't got the correct knowledge in terms of achieving your goals nutritionally as well. Now, if that's something you would be interested in, the normal price, I think I'm going to put it at, is probably £222. Now, for the beta price, if you want to engage in it, I can make that available for you for £77. That will be probably a 8-week course, an 8-week program where I will take you through some group trauma processing. I'll take you through some regulatory exercises where it will improve your digestive process, because obviously that's really important to absorb your nutrients. There's no point in eating food if we're not breaking it down and digesting it and absorbing it. I will also give you some hypnotherapy recordings that you can use in between to condition the unconscious mind onto this better path, and a sleep hypnosis as well, because sleep's really important for repairing and healing the body. If we're not getting adequate sleep, so again, it's getting into a good sleep routine is really important, because if you're not falling into REM sleep, you're not going to release a hormone which is called IGF-1, which is responsible for repairing and rebuilding the body. So if we're not repairing and repairing the muscles, then we're not going to maintain any muscle either. So it really is, it really is a huge jigsaw puzzle that needs to be completed. And if any one of those are out of alignment, it will impact you in achieving your goals. So if anybody is interested in that, I say I will have a chat to Melanie about that later, the beta price, which is £77. And probably post it in the group later as well if anybody's interested. So yeah, so on that note, I'm going to love you and leave you all. And any questions, drop them in the.
Okay, so I hope you found that useful. It was a bit of a long one, which is obviously why I wanted to just play the recording rather than me go over it all again. But yeah, if anybody's got any questions, drop them in the comments and I will answer them when I see them. And if anybody's interested in that beta price, so I will put another post up about this for the 8-week program, where I take you through all the nutritional things, all the process that we need to go through to improve digestion and improve our nervous system, regulate our nervous system, and really get down to the nitty-gritty as to what's driving these emotions and processing them. Bottom line, we need to process them. If you don't process them, they're going to stay firmly stuck to the outside of the amygdala, and these problems are still going to keep coming back. You may have a period of time where you get relief, but they will always come back. So this process applies to anything really, but I am specifically going to tailor this program to inchloss. So yeah. So I hope you found it useful, and have a great day, everybody. It's nearly school pickup. And I shall catch you on the next live lesson Thursday next week.